Welcome to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast, which comes to you every Monday through Friday, and of course today is Friday, and it drops on your favorite podcast platform at midnight, at least as the best of I can tell you, because that's when we set it up to drop, at midnight, so you get to hear it any time during the day, and then of course you can hear it weeks later if you want. That's up to you. That's one of the great things about podcasts. You know, this is one of the fascinating things. And I remember someone I know very well was in the ground floor of the internet just after it became a popular event. Now, a popular reality. Now, what do I mean by that? Remember, prior to the time when the internet was opened up to everybody, then it was really the exclusive for the exclusive use of universities and the military. And I had no idea that's what I was doing. I used the internet when I was in school learning electronics at the Naval Training Center in 1978, and I think 79, 78, 79. Let me think. Yeah, roughly. So because what would happen is we'd be doing these mods. We were learning ourselves. They were called mods, and we'd be learning, all of this is not confidential. And we'd be learning the basics of electronics. And then we'd have a test, and we'd send the test through a machine, and the machine would, into like a scanning device, similar but not as big as what you see in voting, and at least here in Massachusetts. So we'd send it through the scanning device, and then we'd wait for the results, and the results would come back to us after a few minutes, whether we passed or not. And it would go all the way to Tennessee. We were in San Diego. It would go all the way to Tennessee, and then it would come back. That was the internet. I was using the internet in 1978, but we didn't know what it was. We just knew this was this military device that allowed us to do this. So once the internet opened up, and that was in the early 90s, and I know someone who was in the ground floor of the internet, major website and all. And one of the things I brought up to him, because I had realized, is now the internet changed the time focus. So, for example, and I can give you a great example of this. For example, if you wanted to watch, because they're in the news a lot and everyone thinks of it, I'll have to mention it. If you wanted to watch 60 Minutes, well, when did you watch 60 Minutes? You sat down, probably with the family, in the living room, and you all watched 60 Minutes at 7 o'clock p.m. on Sunday nights. You watched All in the Family, I think also at 7 o'clock p.m., or 7 or 8 o'clock p.m. on Saturday nights. Monty Python's Flying Circus, which used to be on PBS, but you'd all watch it at a specific time. And that's the way you watch TV. You all know that. That's how you watch TV. Then with the internet, because of video on demand, that was different. Now, it's not that TV told you when you were going to watch the program. You told TV when you were going to watch the program. And that's that whole reality. So this is what we're doing now. So you listen to the podcast whenever you want to, and it doesn't have to be on the day it drops. It can be anytime. And that's part of what the internet changed. And so here we are. And our first reading today is fascinating because it talks about a community reality. So this is all part of it too. Well, what we're looking at is the laws of Leviticus, and this also, which is interesting, because now we're still in the Torah, but we've obviously moved on from Exodus. So now we're still in the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, which are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So we're in Leviticus, which means we are still in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, which was believed at one time to have been written by Moses. As someone I know once said, yes, the book of Exodus was supposedly written by Moses, including the death of Moses. So, in any case, that was believed for many, many millennia. And then all of a sudden, it was decided that no, Moses may have had a major part in it, but it was actually these oral stories that eventually got written down, and they were put together by editors and all that. So it's not necessarily that Moses sat down and wrote everything that you were reading today. But what we are looking at is the list of festivals which we still know still happen in the Jewish community. And these are the festivals, and these are the different events that come together where where they would all have a gathering, and they would have, there's three feasts mentioned here, and they would celebrate in different ways in this gathering. Well, one of the things to understand is we see the law. This is what you have to do. We see our own law that says every Sunday you're supposed to go to church. Well, this is the problem when we make everything the law. It's real. It's very good. But what's the benefit to us if we do this? Well, you're supposed to follow the law. Okay, well, Father, you're supposed to follow the law. The benefit is you're not going to end up in hell. That's the benefit, because you got to follow the law, Father. No, there's got to be more to it than that. And this is something to do with an interview I did with Monsignor Stephen Rossetti. We didn't discuss his exorcism work, but we discussed his ministry work in ministering in the effects of his psychological work, I guess. And what they found in a study, and we found this in COVID, was that COVID isolated people. So what is the Lord doing? He's setting up the law to guarantee that the community will come together, and that strengthens the community, and that builds the community, and it also helps the most vulnerable of the community. So they are all coming together in worship of the Lord, but there's two sides of that. First side is they're worshiping the Lord. Second side is they are being united to a community. This is something you do on Sundays at Mass, and this is something Monsignor Rossetti found, that during COVID, when there was this isolation caused by shutting down everything, including churches, and I know there were a lot of people get very upset, and they said, the bishop should never have shut down the churches. Okay, but what's the bishop to do? He can turn around and say, I'm going to insist that you open up the churches against the law, and he's putting you at risk of being arrested. What was the bishop to do? Fortunately, what happened here in Massachusetts was the government worked with all the different churches and said, yes, you can open up. Just make sure you have the proper spacing and you clean everything. I mean, we were involved we had a group of people that were wonderful, cleaning benches. We had one guy who was looking for work, and he cleaned the benches, and we paid him to literally Clorox every single Clorox wipes, not pouring bleach on them. Clorox every single bench. And this is some of the stuff that went on all alone because you couldn't have someone else in there. And this is some of the stuff that went on. Remember the famous words of Bill Maher when he was looking back at all the craziness of COVID and said, we washed the mail, which we did. We did. But what it caused is this isolation. What's happening here? The Lord is saying, I want you to gather to celebrate. I want you to gather to celebrate Passover. I want you to gather for atonement. I want you to gather for the Feast of Booths. I want you to gather at all these times, and in doing so, you can look at it the legal perspective. Oh, well, this is what we have to do because the Lord insists we have to do that and all the other stuff. But what's really happening? The Lord is guaranteeing the people are living in community. That's essential. That's an essential part of who we are as people of faith. So this is something the Lord is insisting that the people do so that they will not end up in isolation. You see that? So it's the Lord insisting that we may benefit. Well, what's another example that we can see of this? the insisting that we come to church every Sunday. Well, think about that for a second. Well, the rule is you have to come to church every Sunday. The rule is that the Lord has invited you to gather around him and to receive him in the most intimate way possible because he's giving of himself to you. That goes a lot more than, the rule is you have to go to church on Sunday. This is why I get really frustrated with people who just quote rules. I hate that. And some of, you have to follow, and this is the rule, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. You're missing the point if that's all you do. You're so focused on the rules, you're missing the point that the Lord gave them as gifts to us so that we would be people who would flourish as a human community. I'm not talking financially either. I'm talking in many ways. But if you reduce everything to the law, then it's, you have to do it because that's the rule. No. That may be true, but the Lord is inviting you to have a deep relationship with God. Do you understand? That's the whole thing. So, and you won't understand that or do it unless it's a rule. You see that. So he wants you to understand that this is essential to your well-being on a spiritual and an emotional and a psychological and a physical, the whole bit, that you gather with the rest of the community and come together as people of faith. Now, I don't know that much about the Amish community, but apparently one of the things that the Amish community does when someone greatly offends the community, I'm sure it has to be a really serious offense, greatly offends the community, they shun the person. It's a horrible thing to do to them. They shun them. Now, all of a sudden, no one will even talk to them. They all literally, I've seen representations of this. I don't know if it actually happens. Literally, they turn their back on the person. This is, and it's considered a horrible punishment because the Lord wants the opposite. He wants people to be connected to communities. This is a powerful, powerful thing. We're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and we've been talking about this passage in Leviticus. You can find this. By the way, everything I mentioned, you might say, well, he talks about these Bible verses, but what are we talking about? They're the first reading, the daily reading. So you can find them at any daily missal. Magnificat is one. There's a bound version of the Daily Missal. So this covers both years in the daily masses. There's two of them, 1 and 2. If you want to know the difference between them, 1 is an odd number. Therefore, you use year 1 in odd number years. And 2 is an even number, so you use year 2 in even number years. So we're now in 2025, so we're in year 1. So that said, and we're looking at the readings, the first readings in year 1, and you can also find them at bible.usccb.org. So you're sitting there, well, he's talking about these Bible verses, but I have no idea where the heck you find them, except obviously in the Bible, but he goes from 16 to 32 to whatever. I don't know. Well, it's because they are the daily readings. But remember, sometimes they jump around anyway, but sometimes I've jumped major jumps because there's a feast day or a memorial or something in between. So in any case, so now we're in the book of Leviticus. So we've been through Genesis, different parts, not the whole thing, but obviously different parts. And we were looking at Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all that whole story until finally everyone was down in Egypt. And, I will admit, I can be kind of, and this is important, this is an important message, I can be a little bit irreverent. There's a truth to that. When I'm just trying to give you a different focus on the Bible. Because if there are people that will consider the Bible so holy they won't read it. Well, that makes no sense. It's like, well, this is an important book. It's written by God, and so I'm not going to read that because it's so holy. I wouldn't want to smudge it up. Well, that makes no sense. But there are people like that. I'm not going to read the Bible. It's really holy. No, it's to help you become holy. I do a story on that. I don't know if I'll do it as one of the episodes. I told you the story back when we were growing up and down at South Shore Plaza in Braintree, for those of you in the Massachusetts area. So South Shore Plaza in Braintree. South Shore Plaza is still around, but, sadly, I think the Sears at South Shore Plaza is like one of the very few Sears stores still open. And by the way, what you see in Sears is the future of Amazon. Someday, not now, but you have to realize Sears was the Amazon of its day in all ways, because Sears began as a catalog store. There were no brick and mortar stores. It was all on a catalog. Well, Amazon began by doing everything online, and then it expanded, and then eventually Sears became this huge brick and mortar enterprise, and then eventually the whole mall system started to kind of go a different way, just different direction. And Sears kind of fell to Amazon. But Amazon, maybe 100 years from now, Amazon will be different. Yeah, but you can buy anything at Amazon. You could buy anything at Sears. Remember, you could buy anything at Sears. Who is it? Tim Allen had a whole routine based on that. Where am I going to go to buy it? Sears. Darn right, Sears. Yeah, everything was at Sears. You could buy anything. I don't know if they had a pharmacy. It's one of the exceptions. But, you could do your taxes at Sears. You could buy gloves at Sears. And you could buy chainsaws at Sears. And everything in between. You could buy dryers and washing machines at Sears, and you could buy the clothes to put them in at Sears. You got to realize Sears sold, and still does. I mean, it's still online and everything. And, it still has brick and mortar stores. Sears sold everything. And Amazon sells everything. So, and Sears began as a catalog store. Amazon began as an online catalog store, which it still is. And Sears always had the catalog side. And so we don't know. 100 years from now, maybe 200 years ago, people go, Amazon? Wow, whatever happened to Amazon? I was in Brazil, and Amazon hadn't moved into Brazil. And probably one of the reasons is they must have had, corporate meetings saying, we'd like to move into Brazil, but you can't. Why can't we move into Brazil? It's not illegal. Because everything in Brazil is named Amazon. There's the Amazon electrician, there's the Amazon food, there's the Amazon this, because the Amazon is in Brazil. So yeah, it's a great idea. You come up with the little logo, the A to Z, the whole bit, everything's wonderful. But when you're in Brazil, there's an Amazon everything already there. So what are you going to do? And I think they did still stick with Amazon. But you see all that. And this is kind of, the whole thing with Amazon and Sears and all that stuff. So anyway, I go back to my original story. So Musicland was a record store. And back then we had records. Now you call them vinyl. And the reason why someone put online, this is called a record, not vinyl. Well, we call it vinyl today because to separate it from a cassette and a CD and stuff. Back then you would buy records. And that's what they were called. They weren't called cassettes. No one ever said, well, you're going to be on a cassette. You're on a CD. They started saying that when they started taking place of records. But it was everything was a record, so it was called a record store, even though they would sell cassettes. Well, among the music, and I remember this was in the cassette section, among the music against the wall that they would offer, because the cassettes were against the wall, the records were in the middle, was movie that they called Sacred. Now, I always used to know the music was called gospel, but they would call it sacred. I went, oh, sacred, can I touch it? It was like, why are you calling it sacred music? And I found out, that is another way to look at it. But usually it was gospel music. Well, same thing, people look at the Bible. Oh, but this is written by God. I don't know if we can't write in our Bibles. We have to reverence our Bible. You reverence them into a complete ignorance because you don't know what it actually says. People, it says that in the Bible. Yeah, it does. What was it? What was it? Oh, I said the other day, you could use the term back when I was growing up. One of the things that people would say is, remember, don't say anything that is not in the Bible. Well, that's really a stupid thing, because there are so many things you can say that are in the Bible, and one of them is you can call someone an ignoramus because it happens to be in the letter of James. I'm not telling you to do that, but that's what people used to say. Well, don't say any word that's not in the Bible. Have you ever read what words are in the Bible? Are you kidding me? So, in any case, so we would see this, we would understand that, and so there's this whole concept of don't read the Bible. It is so sacred. You can read the Bible, and back when I was growing up, it was a Protestant thing to read the Bible. It really was. It was all those. I told you I used to listen to Aunt Bertha Sunday mornings. And it was, I used to remember listening to, Aunt Bertha's Bible class or whatever. It was a youth, and I mean maybe 8 to 12, oriented Bible stories and Bible program featuring Aunt Bertha, whoever Aunt Bertha was. And it came out of, I think, Grand Rapids, Michigan, which had a lot of evangelical programs. And I used to listen to her all the time. And Aunt Bertha and all these people would be talking, and Aunt Bertha would be telling the stories and stuff. And I remember that because it was considered a Protestant thing to get the Bible stories, because the Catholics didn't have these programs. Even though in Boston, you always had Catholic TV. Catholic TV in Boston was originally Channel 38. Channel 38 was the Catholic station. It was owned by, I think, the Archdiocese of Boston or somebody connected to the Archdiocese. And then they eventually got out of the TV business. They eventually got into Catholic TV when the internet came on. And they also had Catholic TV when they switched everything over to, at that point, Channel 7. They did Mass at Channel 7. But today's Channel 7 here. And then eventually Monsignor Frank McFarland created and grew Boston Catholic TV, which became Catholic TV. But Channel 38 was originally the Catholic station, and then it became the station of Willie Whistle. Well, Channel 38 was a UHF channel, and there were many people that had no idea there was something called UHF. And I remember I was with kids, my age, and they're talking about Willie Whistle, and they're talking about all these great Speed Racer, and it's on. What do you mean it's on TV? It's not on our TV. And sure enough, they had a TV with a different set of channels. And all of this was growing up. And I got this by trying to talk to you about everything being sacred. But you see what I'm saying? we're missing the whole point of why we have the Bible when we consider everything so sacred. And what is the Lord saying? Come together, be a community, share and celebrate my word. And we miss that point when we make it everything's all a rule. That's the rule. You better go to church every Sunday, otherwise you're going to end up in hell. Well, that's stupid. And I got to be honest, which I always am. But, that's stupid because, well, why do you go to church? So I don't end up in hell. Well, why do you eat lunch? Well, I love lunch. It's my favorite meal. Well, why do you eat it? Because I love to eat lunch. And if I don't eat lunch, I get sick. I starve. Things go really wrong. But the reason why I eat lunch, I love it. We gather together. I have lunch. I always have a great sandwich. I always have this, that, and the other thing. That's why I eat lunch. Well, why do you go to church? Because it's the rule. No. The church should be a community that you came together. That's what happened to me when I came back to the church in 1980 in Point Loma, California. I've told her that story. Point Loma, California, and which is part of San Diego. And, I just met this wonderful community that made our celebration of the Mass a real celebration. And it was wonderful. And it was a community, and we all came together. That's what the Lord is telling the people in Leviticus to do. And notice, he's calling them to take time off from work so that they can gather together as a community. Not because it's the rule, not because you better do it. It's so that they will realize where their priorities are. I'm not going to go to church. I'm going to give all my life over to my company. Well, your company may not be here in 100 years. Just ask the people of Sears. Remember, Sears was the company to be part of for most of the 20th century, if not all of it. And Sears is still around. It's a wonderful company, but it's not as big as it used to be. But there are people that gave their life to it. And the same thing, the Lord is saying, no, give your life to me and everything will flourish. We'll be back on Monday. Have a blessed day. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media.